How's it, Harry?
Good morning, everybody.
You are
Good to do this. Yeah, well, thanks yourself.
good.
Thank you for joining, Anand. We appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Yeah, I think while we're having a few seconds left, just a little bit of housekeeping. Guys, thank you for joining. It's a great day and it's a great event, and it's been hosted by a great organization, ARIA, African Rail Industry Association. For the record, it's the 26th of February, 2026. Just to a request, we're doing this in meeting fashion, so would you kindly stay on mute? Otherwise, I'll have to mute you to get rid of those background noises, and we'll appreciate we stay on mute. Once we're not going to encourage questions and answers after the presentations. Otherwise, it would take too long. So we will keep the questions and answers for the panel discussion at the end of the program. But you're most welcome to make use of the chat room to network and also to post questions there for the panelists. You are also welcome, obviously, to wait for the panel discussion. Then you will be allowed, when recognized, to mute and to ask your questions. So, yet very much a great event, and we look forward to our program. I'm just quickly going to put up the program here for us. There we go. So we're talking today the power of local, evidence-based localization for a competitive rail sector, proudly hosted by African Rail Industry Associations. And ladies and gents, without further ado, I would like to introduce you to the ARIA chairperson, Anand Mudlia, to do the formal welcome and opening remarks. Thank you, Anand.
Thank you, Harry, and welcome to the webinar. Thanks, Marcella and team, for putting it together. I think as an opening remark, we're in exciting Q Vadis in the rail space in South Africa and SADC at large, around the clear objectives that have been set by the Transport Ministry to grow rail capacity on the South African rail network to 250 million tons. That capacity is what is direly needed to grow the economy. We all know that rail has been a binding constraint to the growth of our economy, and unlocking the power of private sector crowding in of funds, together with the good work that Transnet is doing, we believe that there's a new rail renaissance that is taking place to move this industry into one of growth and to really become one that unblocks and creates a competitive base for our various manufacturers, miners, agricultural and other related industries in really using rail as a backbone in their logistics-based supply chains. We're well aware that South Africa rail as a logistics as a component is too costly when you look at GDP, where we're in double figures, closer to 15%. And the only way to reduce the cost of logistics is to ensure a better modal split between rail and road. And that modal split is therefore set in these targetings of this 250 million tons project that capacity that needs to be brought on stream in this next period, in the first 5 years of this rail reform journey. Over the successful mining in Indaba and the coal in Indaba that took place in the last 2 weeks ago, I think our clarity that has come through from the leadership of Transnet, led by Michelle, is that they're on a very good recovery journey, that the tonnages are picking up year on year. And they have got a very clear plan to stabilize that on their side. And they've got a clear plan to also bring money back into the rail network. That capacity is what we all are unlocking together. And there was a clarity that in this split of 250 million tons target that we talk about, that there's Transnet, they will come into the market with a number of close to 180, 185 million tons. That leaves the balance of the capacity that needs to achieve this country objective of 250 million, around another 65 million, needs to come in then from private train operators who contribute rolling stock into the system. I think it's important to note, and Marcella has talked about that, the concept of competition versus the concept of cooperation and working in a space that we all contribute and lean in for positive growth of an economy. I think I've rephrased that a little bit around symbiotic relationships, that ultimately, if you're using a shared rail network and you are multiple operators on a network, it's a symbiotic relationship that you're actually trying to create. And that implies also creating that with the suppliers and the great environment of creating the capacity for this growth industry. And when I say symbiotic, I say it because the rail network statement is very clear that any train operating company applying for slots on the rail network has to demonstrate that its slots that it's applying for and its customers is applying for is a very clear additional volume coming onto the rail network, not displacing any existing product that's on the rail. So in that context, if you're sitting in an environment where this is exactly additional tons, that's then a symbiotic relationship to see how we jointly can accelerate and bring that onto the network as fast as possible. So that's where ARIA really fits in. ARIA fits in as responsible to coordinate the industry, to bring the industry into a place of a joint responsibility to lean in. And our theme then on localization is exactly that theme, to say that in the African Union structure, they were very clear that South Africa will be a rail hub in terms of creating the necessary infrastructure and capacity to fuel Africa's growth in the rail environment. Unfortunately, we have not adequately played a good space. If you look at the different projects on the African continent at the moment, South African companies have not necessarily participated adequately. And as the organization, the power of local is then what we are trying to bring clearly on the table. One, to showcase the capabilities that exist locally, and then use that showcasing of that capabilities to then spearhead procurement events that then will trigger growth in that industry. That context only comes by understanding what is available in the South African system, what's available in terms of price points, in terms of delivery schedules, in terms of uniqueness, in terms of technological capabilities. And those all together imply a robust rail ecosystem that is trying to be unlocked. If you take the extra 65 million tons that train operating companies need to bring into the system, the procurement events around that should be in excess of 30 billion rand worth of investment, even 40 billion rand. That large amount of investment should filter into the localization environment with partnerships, of course, with international suppliers who have got the IP and some of the capabilities that are necessary for our growth. But definitely the opportunity presents itself to really grow the industry with that procurement event that is either on the private sector side or on the Transnet side in terms of their significant work that needs to go back into the rail infrastructure area as well as maintenance on their own assets. So in that broader context, I think it sets the platform for really, really exciting times where we as an industry truly must come together and network, be clear about our capabilities, be clear about what we can contribute in terms of the processes and speed and capabilities we have, and then use that to unlock on the journey. As a TOC, in wearing the hat as Barbary as a TOC in the space, we are proud to announce that we have gone localization with the 23 class locomotives of that is produced by Alstom, the Traxxas 23 class locos that Transnet has an order on the books currently, where that production line is completing. The 240 units should be out by the latter part of this year. That then sets a production capability then for the same production line to generate locomotives for TOCs. We're proud to advise that we've taken a step of ordering 28 units for our slots that are electrical compatible. And the beauty of that locomotive is that it's got a 65% local content capability, an ecosystem that already exists in the South African space. And we're really proud, therefore, to have made that big commitment. We know that other train operating companies and partners in the ARIA space, including Traction, have made also similar announcements of local procurement, localized activities. And we're excited that that combined with wagon development, including maintenance of the Transnet B fleet, we are very confident that you'll create an ecosystem that there will be lots of pieces for everyone to enjoy as we grow this localized environment and for the benefit of jobs in this country. But at the same token, offer competitive capabilities for the core industry that we serve, which is really the mining, agricultural, manufacturing industries, where we have to be competitive. Road has been extremely competitive in the way they price, in the way they organize their resources. For those that are in the bulk space, you'll see many technological innovations in that space, like the PBS road trucks, which can carry 3 axles at the back and hence carry payloads of 50 tons. There's already approvals now for a 4th axle, where road trucks can carry as much as 60 tons. And that means that rail has to be even more competitive to be able to see a modal shift, which brings savings to exporters and then makes them drive jobs by creating more mining activity and other related manufacturing activity. So in summary, I think the messaging that I'd like to phrase is that we're in an exciting QVARTES opportunity. The policy environment is stabilizing for many private sector participation initiatives, including PSPs that have been announced in the logistics space. The appetite from various organizations in the funding space are proving that South Africa is a robust investment case. And if we can, and the network can only improve from its current capabilities that it has today. And if you are moving in a trajectory of growth with very common, a successful Transnet, and you playing part of that growth, and then you sit with very important regulation, the rail safety regulator, that brings very good governance in terms of what it is to be safe and operating with efficiency. And then you got the transport regulator that also will come into play. There will be another clear regulatory environment so that we all can work in a space that maximizes performance. The Competition Commission also has given the rail sector the block exemption, which allows various companies to come together in the space, because we're using shared networks, and look at upstream and downstream optimization in order to do joint procurement, joint optimization, and a lot of nice innovative things. I'll leave the opening remarks with one opportunity that I believe I've been sharing quite openly, is that the only benefactor on the North Corridor, which is currently the RBCT export system, we use the 26-ton installed capacity of the line, is the coal industry. Yet on that corridor, chrome and magnetite also run. And the question is, if you can get a lot of that onto the heavy oil section of the line, you can suddenly improve the volume per train set, which is entrenched in the network statement in terms of longer and heavier trains imply better network access fees. So we believe, excitingly, if we can bring some of that magnetite and chrome trains to heavy oil, 26, even potentially 30-ton per axle loadings, we will suddenly redefine the competitiveness of the system using some of the installed capacity that we have in the network already. So we're excited to be part of this journey with ARIA. We're excited to lead and lead in, and we're looking for everyone to knock on our doors and call us out on things that are not right. I use the message that we all have 2 lenses, a lens with our interest, a lens with our values. If we always keep the values at our eye and look at that through to our interests, we'll always let our values, which is greater than ourselves, drive our interests. If we swip that around and switch to our interests first and then look to our lenses and put values next, we'll always try and tweak it. So let's all call each other out that if we're in this game of localization, let's look at how we can stimulate a great economy through creating a great industry of rail that can really be a catalyst for growth in this country. So with those opening remarks, I wish everyone and all the delegates on this call a robust conversation around how we can move this industry with speed, because action, I think, is now of the nature. We've got good systems, good agreements now coming into play, but I think action is now what we're looking for. Every 1 million tons of a new volume on the rail network on access fees of average of 100 Rand will imply around 100 million Rand a year of new access fees, which go immediately into creating a better, more robust, stable, improving network. So if we can fast track more volume, we immediately can bring the cash we need to unlock more network stability and investment into the infrastructure. So thank you, everyone, and looking forward to a robust conversation today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sanan. Talking about value, that were valuable words. And, definitely, we're looking forward together with you to a robust rail system with lots of local components and the ecosystem driven by ARIA to make this work. Thank you, Anand, for sharing. We learn a lot from you. Thank you so much. Ladies and gents, let's have a look at our program. So you can see we're going to have lots of discussions, obviously, around the local support fund and local content. And we've got learned participants and panelists who's going to talk to us today, including the study implementation team and so on. And we also have Msela Nhlapo, the CEO of ARIA, who's going to talk to us a little bit later. And then you can see we're going to have a Q&A session for those of you who join later at 11:25 roundabout. We'll have a Q&A session. So keep your questions to the panel discussion. We unfortunately can't take just questions during the presentations. So without further ado, then I would like to introduce you to Metsha Khumane. He's the Director of Rail Transport Equipment, the Department of Trade and Industry and Competition. And the topic here is the keynote policy context and designation framework, local content designation under the Public Procurement Act. Thank you very much, Metsha. Just a moment for me, please.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lungiswa Gqowa. Metsha is not available, so she has sent her apology.
Thank you, Lungi. Are you going to present on her behalf, or is she not going to present at all?
No, we don't have a presentation. So at the end of just before ARIA chairperson, I'll come in and say a few words.
Okay, thank you, Lungi. Appreciate it. All right, ladies and gents, then we manage that one. And we will look at our program again. So then we will call on Tondani Nevutalu, who's the project manager for the Local Support Fund. And she's going to talk about the Local Support Fund's role in rail localization, how LSF is catalyzing evidence-based industrial development. Thank you very much, Tondani.
Thank you, Harry. I will try and share my screen. So let's see if this works. Are you able to see the presentation view?
Excellent. You can proceed. Thank you, Tondani.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Harry. And thank you, Anand, for giving the context on why localization is important, especially within rail. understanding the gaps, like you mentioned, understanding the gaps in mapping out our capabilities, our technical advantage in the country, and also our processes is what will be then the key driver to how we build strategies and help distribute the investments in the industry. And like you mentioned, we have to move with speed. So I would love to then introduce to you the Localization Support Fund, the work that we do, an overview of how we support companies in the different sectors, but also then introduce the study that we have now commissioned with Letsema Consulting, but also endorsed by ARIA and the DTIC. So before I get ahead of myself, my name is Tondani Nebutaru. I'm a project manager at the Localization Support Fund. I've been joined today by my two colleagues. We have Leon Naidi on the line, who is our head of operations, and we have Twanelo Rakaibe, who is also project manager at the Localization Support Fund. So you might see them coming in a bit as we do the Q&A, but nice to meet all of you. So who is the Localization Support Fund? LSF is a non-profit company, meaning that everything that we do is of no commercial interest. Rather, we focus on seeing results in the manufacturing capabilities that we build and also the jobs that we create within the country. We are a public benefit organization, which was established through partnerships of public and private sector, more specifically through the office of the DTIC. Our mission is to accelerate localization as the driver of industrialization. So considering this, our mandate is therefore to help unlock industrial potential through funding initiatives that identify competitive localization, how we de-risk investments, help businesses scale, and also support firms and policymakers in scaling manufacturing. Our funding comes from the private sector, the likes of Coca-Cola, Air Liquide, and Engen, all through the competition settlements. We report to a board which comprises representation from the funders, but also we have government entities represented, we have business, and we have labor unions represented on our board. So I think within this room and the context set for today, it's quite clear that there's a business case for localization within South Africa, but also globally, we've seen that localization is the driver of industrial development. We see how localization is able to build industrial depth, we reduce reliance on volatile import markets, and we support job creation. Additional to this, we also introduce greater product customization, and we're able to service industries locally, but without having building supply chain resilience and without having to tap into volatile markets. We've also seen that global disruptions over the years, from shipping delays to geopolitical tensions, have shown that countries with a strong domestic manufacturing base bounce back faster and are able to grow more sustainably. So for this reason, localization in South Africa is an economic necessity. As the LSF, we focus on high impact strategic sectors within South Africa. This is where we believe we have the right to win. So these sectors are where capabilities already exist, but also where additional investments can create sustainable competitive advantage. We have listed 8 sectors here on the right, and in a few slides, I'll go over some of the projects that we have undertaken within these sectors and what we then have published on our website. I think it's important to note that our work goes beyond just import substitution. We want to ensure that firms are able to scale, they're able to innovate, and eventually compete in the export markets. It's also important to note that because of our public benefit status, we do not offer capital funding. There are other institutions that take care of capital funding. So everything that we do is within the mandate of investing in initiatives that strengthen the sector as a whole. So what it means is when we are involved in initiatives or in research, we publish the findings or publish the case studies so that the industry as a whole can benefit from the work that we do. So specifically, what are the things that we do? We deliver through industry research where we identify what are the exact components or the detailed business cases that are required to progress localization. We look at the detailed value chain development and how we can build scale within the ecosystem. We provide hands-on manufacturing support where we are able to fund resources that can help manufacturing facilities scale up in order for them to compete on a global scale, but also have sustainable resources and expertise that can then sustain that industry. We also do a lot of project execution and management, advocacy, and network orchestration. Because of this oversight that we have across several industries and also who is doing what, we're able to understand how to bring together the different buyers, the suppliers, and the public entities to support greater scale, but also sustainable localization. So at the heart of it, although our work spans from detailed modeling, research, but also down to factory diagnostics and building interventions within the actual factory site, and also moving into national industrial policy, we do everything to make sure that we have implementable strategies, implementable localization strategies. So as mentioned earlier, we are working across several sectors. We work from automotive sector, critical infrastructure. We have clothing, textile, and leather sector. We also go into chemicals, green transition, machinery and electrical components, and all in various ways. So whether it's industry research or value chain development, where we're helping companies build up scale, but also looking at manufacturing interventions where we're bringing in resources into a site and helping that company develop and upskill. We basically tailor make the solution for what we think the company needs, but also what the industry would benefit most from. So as you see here, varying sectors, varying different clients. I think there's another page here that highlights our work within the green transition space, chemicals, medical devices, etc. I think it's also important to note that like I mentioned earlier, the work that we do is published on our website. So if you do go on the website, you're able to find the research, the case studies that were conducted, understand what the impact was, and what are the strategies that come from that research into being implemented. I mentioned earlier that we have manufacturing interventions as well. So we've seen that LSF has helped unlock around 200 million Rand in localization value add. The work we do aims to move from theoretical knowledge into the manufacturing floor. And we've seen tangible impact being captured already in the likes of Cape Union Mart. We worked with a company called Carboferrum in transmission and distribution industry, and the likes. So all of this work shows us that if we combine evidence, stakeholder alignment, and practical implementable strategies, localization is feasible and commercially competitive. This is why we believe that rail is now the next priority. So you might be asking, why rail industry? And Anand has alluded to some of the complexities that exist within the industry. We've seen that over 2.5 billion Rand is being imported into the country in terms of rail equipment. And what this means is that there is lost industrial depth within the country. We have lost supplier development, higher forex exposure, and underutilized local capability. Importing also extends lead times. It increases risks and often raises lifestyle costs. So if we think about our maintenance backlog, for example, there's an immediate and growing demand for locally produced consumable parts, refurbishment components, and systems, reducing the lead times, but also making us less dependent on volatile markets. With rail flagged as a binding constraint for GDP growth, localization is therefore not just an industrial policy priority, but it becomes a competitive imperative. So how can localization drive industrial development within the rail industry? For one, we know that rail localization is one of the strongest job multipliers. In fact, we've seen that manufacturing localization and manufacturing facilities for one job created in a manufacturing site, manufacturing a component, you are able to create 4 other jobs along that value chain. So it's quite clear that it's the biggest job multiplier that we have in the country. We also understand that because rail systems operate in long-term repeatable production and maintenance cycles, there's a predictable demand that we can leverage, where this can build industries within the mechanical, electrical, metallurgical, and digital subsystems, etc. So localization unlocks quite a few things. We unlock manufacturing depth within the country. We have high quality engineering and technical jobs being created, ecosystem development overall as we leverage adjacent industries like automotive, defense, mining equipment that could result from this. We also have skills upgrading. And because of this long-term certainty of having lifestyle maintenance and refurbishment cycles, we are able to bring a sustainable demand within the country. We also then know that with the investments that are taking place in Africa, like Anand mentioned earlier, we are able to position South African firms to be able to become the hub of rail industry, being able to export opportunity and capabilities if we strengthen the home base. But again, as noted, there are key challenges that we've seen. Progress has been made, but there remains a gap. And this is within the supply chain limitations that we see. We have financial constraints, and then we can also talk about skills gaps. So as we think of localization in the rail industry, we first have to acknowledge the foundation of the work that has been done to date. We need to build on this foundation of industry research already carried out by the likes of TIPS and others. We have internal firms that have localized quite a few components and have initiatives that have progressed localization mandate. We look at the likes of Transnet's initiatives and component localization. We have Pras's Gibela program, OEM partnerships that have looked at technology transfer into the country, existing policy that supports localization and local content. And as we've seen, this ecosystem has built some sort of capability, but again, as mentioned, there is a gap that we still need to close and progress on further. We've seen gaps in that the demand is still fragmented across operators. We have localization thresholds that have resulted in exemptions. We don't necessarily have an understanding of the national supplier capability baseline. Like Anand mentioned earlier, if we understand what we're able to do, the technology we have and the processes we have, this can be a step in advancing industrial development. We also haven't necessarily given a lot of attention to maintenance and refurbishment market. And the policy instruments we have in place will now need to be reviewed against the new Public Procurement Act. So what we are aiming to do is have a study that is designed to exactly fill these gaps and ensure that the next generation or the next wave of localization strategy is implementable and future-proof. So the study that I'm talking about aims to add value over several ways. For one, we want to consolidate the demand to give a 10-year outlook on what that looks like for major operators, but also as we have private buyers coming into play, how do we then map out that demand so suppliers can prepare for investments along the right prioritized components? We want to produce a unified and detailed supplier capability map and across the entire system, so we understand exactly what can we do, to what capacity, and what is the feasible expansion or extension that we can have within the country before we reach a point of importation. We want to review existing policies and align any recommendations with the new Public Procurement Act. We want to model cost and feasibility localization and make sure that the thresholds that are being set are phased and understand that there's a journey that we still need to travel as a country to get to that ambitious target. And lastly, we want to provide procurement reforms that make localization practical. So our aim is to see how do we protect the gains already made and strengthen what exists, but also provide evidence that is needed to guide the sector through its next phase of transformation. So this then brings us to a bit more detail around the study. The study was commissioned by the Localization Support Fund, and we are working with Letsema Consulting to then undertake the work and conduct the research, etc. This study was endorsed by the African Rail Industry Association, so ARIA, and we are working with the DTIC as well, just to ensure that we are aligning all our recommendations to policies and the new recommendations that are coming up with the Public Procurement Act. The study will run over 6 months. We did start the study in the past month, and it will run across 5 work streams. These 5 work streams will then be detailed by Letsema Consulting, which I think will come and present after me. So I'll let them get into that detail. But it's important to note that the key stakeholders of the study is the industry. So we need active participation. We need to understand where the pain points are. How do we leverage the information we currently have and provide transparency and guidance in order to make sure that industry is involved, but also can own the strategies as they move forward? So everything we are doing on the study is centered around 3 critical questions. The first one is, where is the opportunity for localization? We want to get into the detail of what is the component, what is the system or the service that is easily localizable and will have high impact. We also want to understand what are the actions that are needed to unlock this. So where is policy going to play a role? Where is procurement strategy going to play a role? What are the investments that are required? And then lastly, how do we make the economics work for the operators and the suppliers? So we will look at cost modeling. What are the risks? What are the total cost of ownership of components and not just the upfront cost that the company will have to face? Success of this study has to be seen across the varying industry stakeholders. So we want to be realistic with our thresholds. We want to support full implementation roadmaps, any procurement and contracting models that we can suggest and recommend that will help then integrate the demand and the capability into the whole ecosystem. These are the tools that we believe will create an impact. And beyond this study, LSF is positioned to help companies in several ways. We support operators with planning and procurement. We support suppliers and service providers with capability assessments, onboarding support, and technical upgrading. We also work with policymakers to provide evidence for practical and implementable localization. And the broader ecosystem benefits because we have a neutral and coordinated stance on how we facilitate, being able to understand and have oversight on the different stakeholders, what each person is doing, where each person can play a role. This is how we help to bring the industry together. Our role as a whole is to make sure that the sector itself moves from policy to practice, and we can move from ambition to actually putting an action into play. So my parting message is that localization succeeds when all of us are involved, every bit of the ecosystem. So your engagement in this study, your insights, your collaboration, anything that you can contribute will be of great help. We want to make sure that the recommendations are implementable. We want to make sure that the opportunities are investable and we can actually make progress forward. So I will leave our details here for a second, but it's quite easy to find us if you search Localization Support Fund, or you can email me directly or any of my colleagues directly. Please do reach out to us to participate in the study, but also for any other discussions where we can move forward the industry together. We have also published quite a lot of research of what we've done before and case studies where we've entered into manufacturing side and have seen impact. This is on our website. So again, if you just search for our name, we should be able to pop up. But thank you so much, and I look forward to answering some of the questions during the panel discussion. Thanks, Harry.
Thank you, Tondani. This was great. A comprehensive overview of what you guys are doing and very relevant. So thank you very much for sharing. I'm quite sure they're looking forward to engaging with you in the panel discussion. Thank you, Tondani.
Thank you.
Right, ladies and gents, looking at our program. Now we're going to talk to the study implementation team. They're from Letsema Consulting, and they're going to talk about real value chain study scope and industry participation, 5 integrated work streams, and how to get involved. Thank you very much, Letsema.
Thank you, Harry, and hi, everyone. Very excited to be here today and looking forward to engaging. So I'm just going to share my screen as well. We've got a very short presentation to go through. We'll be working very closely with the LSF team. We are actually the implementation partners for the study. And just a bit of an overview of Letsema, right? So we've been working within the rail industry for more than 20 years now. And I think the benefit of working with Letsema is that we've also worked across the other supporting industries as well. So we've also worked within mining, energy as well. And we've worked across a series of topics, right? So we've worked across contract management. We've done a lot of procurement and supply chain exercises within these organizations. And we've worked on the supply development strategies and localization strategies at a government level and at an SOC level. That being said, we are hoping to leverage the wealth of expertise and industry knowledge and insights that we've gained throughout the past 2 decades in order to formulate an industry-wide view in terms of understanding what is possible from a localization and transformation perspective for the rail industry. And we plan to do this through focusing on some key principles for the study. So before I go into the approach, really what we want to do as a baseline to inform the study is, lead the study with first principles. And what that means for us is we want to be collaborative. It's very important for us to understand insights from multiple stakeholders across the value chain within the rail space. So we'll be speaking to suppliers, operators, policymakers, as well as other implementation agents throughout the work that we'll be doing. We will also be focusing on practicality. So we understand from the previous exercises that we've been involved in, obviously there's a lens of practicality that needs to be taken into account when proposing regimes for localization and transformation. And we'll be leveraging quite a lot of those lessons across the transport, mining, and energy sectors, because we know, there's been quite a few attempts to drive localization and transformation from various stakeholders. So we'll be pooling those lessons for this particular study. The other principle that we'll be focusing on is ecosystem thinking. And what that means for us is we know that we're working with suppliers that vary in terms of size, scale, and maturity. We also know that there's different elements of the value chain where each of these suppliers play. And we'll be focusing on that entire value chain, right through from, design, manufacture, assembly, operations, support, maintenance, and enablement as well. And the idea is to identify what the as-is looks like in terms of where are the hotspots for participation and true industrialization, localization, and transformation, and where are the future opportunities for those things, depending on industry shifts, regulatory changes, and changes within the supplier and operator landscape. So we'll be focusing on localization as well from 2 paradigms. One is from an individual or personal kind of perspective, and the second one is from a supplier or business perspective. When we talk about individuals, we're looking at opportunities for job creation and skills development. And when we talk about businesses, we're looking for opportunities for value chain integration. All right. And what we understand is that those opportunities will vary if you look at situation for 2026 versus 5 years from now versus 10 years from now. So with the insights that we know and the trends that we're expecting, we want to build a picture that looks at what are the opportunities for localization and transformation now, and how will those potentially shift based on what's happening in the industry and the environment as a whole. The other principle that we want to focus on is technical excellence. So what we want to ensure is that we obviously maximize and move the dial on transformation and localization, but we do not want to do that in terms of compromising technical standards whatsoever. So whatever mechanism or approach we're considering for localization and transformation, we want to do that making sure we thoroughly check the technical capabilities of the suppliers. And we want to ensure that from a technical perspective, number one, there's capability and capacity to meet whatever solution we're proposing before proposing that solution. And that's why when we are engaging with the market, specifically suppliers, we'll be doing quite an extensive supply engagement process that focuses on many paradigms. So it's not just, what is your transformation status? Have you been able to localize? And what are your roadblocks and opportunities for localizing now? But we're also wanting to understand your capacity and capability in terms of your current operational scale, what your plan is for growing, and also, how are you responding to the market? We know that there's been several market shifts over the past decade, and there's going to be future market shifts as well. And in the wake of that, how geared is your organization for operating and sustaining throughout the changing kind of industry paradigms that we're seeing? So I thought I'd start off by leading the discussion with the principles we're focusing on. And in terms of the process, I think Thundani covered it quite well, but there are a couple aspects of our process that we want to go through so that you have a holistic understanding of what the project looks like. As Thundani mentioned, it will be a study that's taking place over a 6-month period. The study roughly started in February this year, so we'll be engaging throughout the course of this year and hopefully have quite a robust solution and proposal for transformation and localization before the year ends, right? So the phases that we'll be focusing on is demand side mapping, supply side mapping, policy and instrument review, strategic guidance for rail sector transformation, and then opportunity scaling and recommendations. In terms of the demand side mapping, this is the first time where we'll be looking at localization from an industry-wide perspective, which is fantastic because we're not just looking at one particular organization and saying, look, this is the demand plan, here's the potential scenarios, and let's solve for that particular organization. What we're doing is we're looking at it from an industry-wide perspective. So we'll be consolidating demand across different operators within rail, and then understanding what a potential demand landscape looks like over the next 10 to 15 years. Right? Obviously, there will be some scenario modeling that's built in there in terms of just being realistic of what's, high probability, low probability, moderate probability. But nonetheless, we will be pooling the demand plan of those entities. And then we will be breaking down those demand plans in terms of what does the bill of material looks like, what does the various asset classes looks like, and what is the subcomponents and components that we need to be focusing on. From there, we will be building a value chain that then looks at where does each of the suppliers play within that value chain to provide the services and components identified based on the demand schedule. And in doing that, we'll be mapping suppliers according to the value chain and saying what is current capability, but also what is future capability based on the aspirations that will be outlined in the engagement. We will then be undertaking an exercise where we understand what the capacity, technology, readiness, and scalability for each of those suppliers look like, and also the geographic and value chain distribution of those suppliers. The other very important exercise that we'll be doing is a policy and regulatory review, right? And this goes from a global, national, and municipal level, as well as a local level, to understand, firstly, what are the governing frameworks? And like I said, having worked within the localization space for the past 2 decades, we've got a very good understanding of what the governing and regulatory frameworks looks like. But we also want to make sure that we keep abreast of any changes that might have happened over the past year or so. And then we want to understand, based on previous case studies and how policies have been applied and adopted, what have been the key lessons learned and implementation challenges? Where are there hotspots of duplication? Where are there hotspots of fragmentation? How do we really build an ecosystem that's focused on transformation and localization whilst working with the different players within the value chain to maximize economic and socioeconomic benefits, right? And then we will be proposing a recommendation for collaboration as well as supply chain integration across the value chain. And that will be underpinned by an economic development regime. And the regime at this point in time, has not been set in terms of how it's going to look, what's going to be the sub-elements or the sub-components to it. And we really want to open or kind of approach this project with an open mindset in terms of saying, yes, there's been mechanisms of doing this globally, locally, and this is what it looks like. But for this particular segment, for this particular industry, what would best in class look like? And how do we then scale that back in terms of the reality of our current situation, the supplier base, and the regulatory landscape in which we operate? From there, once we have our economic development regime, we will then be proposing an implementation plan supported by a supplier development plan, which will then talk to, one, how do we select or propose opportunities for supply chain integration at the onset, and how do we then work towards transitioning suppliers, right? Be it from the perspective of transitioning existing suppliers into more complex service requirements, or integrating new suppliers and ensuring that the objectives of transformation and localization are continuously met throughout the project timeframe. So that is essentially what we'll be focusing on. Ultimately, the problem statement focuses on how do we unlock opportunities across the entire rail value chain within the manufacturing and maintenance spaces with the objective of improving competition or competitive ability within the rail landscape of South Africa. So yeah, that's it from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Chanel. Great presentation. I like the question where you said, are you geared, in terms of your capacity and your capability to grow into this? I think that's very relevant, and collaboration and supply chain integration, the supply development plan sound very great. So we're looking forward to this proposal for transformation and localization. Thank you, Chanel. I will definitely talk a lot to you in the next session. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Good, ladies and gents. Now we're going to have the Chief Executive Officer of African Rail Industry Association, Sarah Nhlapo, and she's going to talk to us about industry perspective, local rails, local jobs, opportunities and challenges for successful localization. Thank you very much, Marcella.
Thanks, Harry. You have the presentation.
You want me to share it for you? You want me to share?
Please. In the meantime, good morning to everyone. We started the journey of rail reform with changing the policy that will then allow private sector to participate, and that private sector is us. And the National Rail Policy makes certain important clauses that, at least the foundation of the rail policy, that of localization, transformation, and to create sustainable jobs. So it is on the background of the rail reform, national rail policy, that we lean on it again to act and work in the best interest of the industry. Our industry has always been around Transnet, and we have new players in the market. And most of those players may not necessarily know who does what. And this study is meant to address that, so that when the 11 operators and odd are looking for rolling stock, are looking for workshops, we know where to find them. And at the same time, when the designation policy needs to be effected, we must inform what goes into the designation policy. If we don't give DTI the information to make, to help them to protect our market and to make sure that we don't lose the manufacturing capabilities that we have. And those capabilities must be preserved, and the only way to preserve them is to maintain and grow the local manufacturing capacity, so that we are then able to take advantage of the opportunities that are offered under the CFTA. We take upon our mandate that has been given by the African Union that South Africa shall champion the manufacturing of rail rolling stock. So it is our responsibility to breathe life into what government has put on the table for us. In the past few years, I have learned that government is not in our businesses.
Marcella, sorry, can I interrupt you there? You can tell me when to advance your slides.
Okay, now I'll do that. I'll do that.
Yes. And can we see you, please?
I'm hiding. And so government, I've learned that when we don't communicate with government, that government cannot know what our pains are. And it is important that as industry, we come together and start communicating what we expect from government. Because if we fail to do that, DTIC cannot help us. DTIC says that Minister Pakstow says we need to have an export-led economy. And ARIA, as an export council, we must find each and every one of us in the industry to grow locally, so that then the next step is on the export market. And this is why we have to do this, this study. The study came about that there was a need to do a study. And as somebody that has mastered the craft of finding free stuff, I then came across a localization support fund. And we applied for this study to be done, and government is funding this study. It's an independent study. Letsema was appointed after a tender process that was run and administratively run by LSF. So it's a work that has been open, advertised properly, and this is what we're trying to achieve. So Harry can go to the next slide. So what we aim to address today, to get a comprehensive view of the opportunities, the challenges, with regards to where we come from in terms of localization. The landscape for railways has changed. The scale of challenge that we are confronting is that the data says that there's an increment of imports but manufacturing is declining, and we have an increase in unemployment. Then we go to our blueprint, which is the constitutional mandate, the legal foundation for our localization, and it talks about economic inclusion. And economic inclusion is not Misela versus somebody else, but is that the ecosystem that we as the railroaders operate in. How do we hold each other so that when we produce is an end-to-end within the ecosystem for us to produce what the country needs? The policy architecture has the rail reform has worked, and what does this success look like in its current form? And where can we draw and maybe give an example that rail reform is taking place and things are changing? What do we have to overcome, and what we must do as an industry? Can go to the next page. This data is sourced to reflect how much we are importing as a country. And from 2020 to 2024, we have significantly increased our imports. And the imports that we must know, they are not necessarily coming from or at least the buyer that is importing is not necessarily from the state-owned entities. What we have observed is that the industry itself will import. And sometimes the industry itself is not importing because they want to, but because we don't know where to find what. And hence it's important that we shouldn't work in silos anymore, but each of us, our survival depends on the next person. Because when opportunities come through these doors of ARIA, it is important for us to know who in the industry can manufacture this, who can come together to bring their resources. Can we work under the Competition Commission for the block exemption to pull in our resources to make sure that we are able to protect the manufacturing decline? We started at the dawn of democracy at a certain point. We are where we are today. We are faced with a high unemployment crisis. As a connection that for every 1 billion rand spent on important rail equipment represent 2,500 and 3,000 lost jobs that could have been created domestically. Localization is not just policy, it is an economic imperative. It is the lives of men and women of this country. It tells us if there's a tomorrow or not. But localization for the sake of localization does not build this country. And it will be important for us to own our truth so that when we work together for the common good. Next slide, please. We find at least our cue from the constitution of this country. It says state procurement must be fair, equitable, and transparent, and may advance person at disadvantage by unfair discrimination through preferential procurement. What Section 217 doesn't say, it doesn't say that when you have rail reform and there are private players in place, what the responsibilities of private players is. So private players will not be at this stage in terms of the constitution for preferential procurement be affected. And that is the truth that is offered by our constitution. Section 9.2 of the Equality and Promotion, the development duty, says government must promote social economic development. And state-owned entities have always been government policy implementers. So we need to find ourselves where government may not necessarily look at where we're looking at. If there is no money for Transnet for PRASA, there will be no money for an SMME. And actually, SMMEs are in the downstream economy, and they are the people that actually employ the majority of the people in this country. We have had the Preferential Procurement Framework, Public Procurement Act. I think at the moment we're still waiting on regulations, and I think Ms. Lungi will share that with us. The sector designation, the threshold. If we are not able to give DTIC real numbers, they can't give a decent threshold, because they will be told, where do you get those numbers if us as industry cannot prove it? The implementation partners at this stage is Transnet, PRASA, and private sector compliance. But when it comes to private sector, we need to tell ourselves the truth. Most of us, excluding me, in the business of the non-profit companies, the reason that we are in business is because of profits, the bottom line. And these operators, that will be the same thing that they will be pursuing. If they don't know where they find us, if we don't give DTI the right numbers, DTI through policy cannot protect our interest. Once we understand localization is not a policy choice, it's a constitutional obligation. But we must remember that we need to have those that help us. If we have a Transnet price that is significantly higher than a price that we would supply to somebody that is in private sector, we are not only overcharging Transnet or PRASA, but we are killing ourselves, because those two institutions will be told that they are not competitive, and as a result, they will not be able to quote prices that are affordable so that those prices benefit us. We look at the rail reform and its intention. The policy is a deliberate bias towards local manufacturing of rolling stock, the railway lines, the suppliers. It's up to us to know this policy. It is only when we know where our mandate comes from that we can say, Misela, go to DOT and say to DOT, in terms of this policy, this is what you as government said. And then DOT, with our cooperative government in general, will then use the information that we have provided them to say that here is company X and SMME, this is what they produce, and here they are in the value chain. If we fail to provide that information, the DTIC cannot and the DOT cannot assist us. Next slide, Ellie. The thresholds as they stand with the last designation a policy. As industry, through this study, we must tell DTI if we have the 55% or we have 70%. The locomotives, it must be the same, EMUs, wagons. We must be able to say that I manufacture wagons, and here is my capacity. So that when there is a need for wagons, those that have to buy wagons, those wagons are immediately available. Or at least there is capacity for manufacturing. We will work with government FDIs to make sure that this rail reform is funded appropriately, particularly when it comes to the employment of our sector and to protect the industrial base of South Africa. Next slide. As I've said, that the national rail policy is biased towards local manufacturing. If we don't know the policy, we can't claim our rights. We need to claim our rights through this study to give government information that they don't have. The landscape has changed. It is no longer government that is procuring. There are other actors that come from who we are. We have an export strategy. What are we exporting? Which standards do we have to comply with? How expensive are those standards? We can only respond to the export strategy if we are able to grow locally. Whatever happens at Mittal affects our industry. The unintended consequences of the Steel Master Plan, and perhaps the need for us that when we plan and around this policy, that there is a systems thinking, that the Steel Master Plan is not only about steel, but other related industries. So it cannot just go on its own. We can't have a master plan that is meant for 5 years. A master plan, and the business of government, by the way, it's long-term in nature. So the investment by public sector is different from investment by private sector. We must be able as an industry to develop our own technologies, skills, and manufacturing capacity. We are told by business, and I'm sure many will agree on this call, that at least we claim that we don't have skills. Us as industry, we must be able to say, what is it that we don't have and how are we going to resolve that? If we don't solve those problems ourselves, government is not in the railway industry. They will not help us unless we tell them what we need. And that is us working together. The designation policy had certain percentages in terms of the infrastructure. We need to know who does what at what capacity. Next slide. So with the rail reform, what has worked? It has been a little bit confusing for many of people in the industry, because you have these big documents that come out, TOCs, routes. We were just happy supplying to Transnet and PRASA. The world has changed, so we must change with it. The 11 TOCs approved, many of them are ARIA members. How do you as industry gather around these 11 TOCs and negotiate for yourselves? The vertical separation is in place, is taking place. The network statement is finalized. We hopefully will have a new one soon. Many of us have not even consulted the network statement. We don't know how the network statement will affect our businesses. But on the Transnet side, at least, there's a recovery. There's a recovery, but there's also some things that disables state-owned entities. Private sector, you can go to the boss's office, lean over and say, I want to order that thing. And they will say, go ahead. In public sector, you can't. And yet, public sector is expected to perform on the same level as private sector. The rules are different. At one stage, as industry in South Africa, we need to have a conversation about the Public Finance Management Act. That when government gives Transnet or PRASA money, what is the percentage of that rent? For each and every rent, how much goes into PFMA and how much goes into the mandate? Why is it that the PFMA has become more important than the mandate? Because the mandate of all these institutions are those mandates that are linked to transformation, to localization. PFMA is not. And in fact, I will argue that tenderpreneurs are creatures of PFMA. It doesn't allow us to invest long term, and you agree with me that PFMA contracting period, and for our industry, that is quite capital intensive. The rules should be different. Next slide. We are excited that government in the budget yesterday have made more money available to Gibela. We know that Gibela has done 60% local content. And I think that there are people that still struggle to get access into Gibela. But what is it that we can do as a collective? Gibela is an area member. Can we ask to sit around the table with Gibela? And not demand a peace, but collectively as a sector, what is it that we want to do together to protect our interest? Because if I don't survive, the next person does not survive, the industry collapses. And if the story of Gibela works, it's a story worth consolidating and making sure that we are able to apply elsewhere. Next slide. If one day somebody were to ask me if I added any value in South Africa in my lifetime, I will point precisely to this. Traction led by a visionary man, James Hawley. They have procured rolling stock for an amount of 3.4 billion. Unfortunately, that man has a good heart. When he does this type of investment, he always says that the community that I operate in, next to Roslyn, they must benefit too. So this 3.4 billion rand is going to employ over 600 people next to Roslyn. And it's not only 600 people, it's 600 young men and women that have no hope if this was not taking place. Young men and women that will go into crime and be consumed by drugs in this country because this investment is not taking place. There are local companies that are manufacturing and supplying directly into Traction. Traction has its own companies that they use. I don't know them. How do we then multiply to whoever that is supplying Traction then is able to supply to all the other TOCs? Because we can duplicate this. But the duplication only takes place when information is made available to us and the DTIC and DOT. When the CEO of Traction, they were launching the investment, he reminded me of a time where I was a brave voice pushing for reform. And I'm standing up again and I'm putting up my hand to the industry that here's the reform. Our next job is to implement localization. Because if we fail to implement localization, we'll fail this country and the generations to come. Next slide. When we arranged for this conversation, we asked many of you to provide us with questions. Some gave us statement. He had said that localization instruments change repeatedly, often creating confusion. You are calling for something that is coherent, that is easy to understand, so that even if Traction or Transnet or PRASA or anyone has to implement, it's easier to implement, and we can easily report on it. But when we know that something does not work for us, we need to suggest to government what could work and put that proposal to government. We can be, as ARIA, we can facilitate that process. The demand side gaps, it's what kills our sector. There's been a general overhaul contract that has been in the media lately. And what we are not telling around the GO contract is what the damage of that contract has done to the industry. The GO contract, I mean, the tender itself, I think it went out maybe 3-4 times, and each time it was withdrawn. And in that period, there are companies that were destroyed overnight. And sometimes, as an industry, we are responsible for this. So there is a need for the complete truth to be told about the GO contract. The procurement cycles with no long-term planning, they need to change. Any government that has self-respect plans long-term. Any government that comes up to be a powerhouse takes a long-term approach. Us as private sector, we cannot continue keeping our factories running based on a 3-year contract of PFMA, and yet I can't, as an employer, sign a 3-year employment contract with an employee. So there is a need that our laws are they talk to each other and understand the impact that they have on the others. The deindustrialization that we're seeing, we need to reverse this. But it's going to it's going to mean that an active participation in the process from each and every one of us. And sometimes this deindustrialization, there are many reasons why it takes place. And we will not get into that. But what I know is the following, that we need to change this. And it's not only government, it's us. We talk in our corners. We know more or less what the solution could be. And this study is supposed to correct that. So your active participation from all levels of suppliers should be encouraged, and people need to please adopt and participate, because this is for the industry. Next slide, Harry. What the industry must do, we must commit capital, but we can't commit capital under PFMA. We must commit to tooling and workforce training, but business is not in the business of training. The following statistics will be scary. The industry is saying that we want artisans. An artisan will naturally come from TVET colleges. However, 80% of graduates coming out of TVET are in admin work. So we need to change our investment priorities to make sure that when we invest in education, we invest for the long term, but we do not just train, we train for the industry. Long-term partnerships are important. And those OEMs that are in the country that remains committed to our country, such as Alstom. Many people do business with Alstom, and many have managed to survive when Transnet and Prasa go through changes. So in the ecosystem, we must make sure that there's an alignment in terms of what the industry needs. That means having serious conversations with the training people. South Africa is one of the countries that spend a significant amount of money on education, but yet the graduates that we get out of universities are not employable. This is not something I'm making up, but this is what you are saying in the questions that you have sent. Next slide, Harry. We say that the power of local begins here because you are here. This is an invitation that we must build locally. That when South Africa moves, the continent moves. This is a call to action to government, industry, labor, communities. Every locally produced locomotive wagon component, it represents the livelihoods, technical skills and opportunities for artisans, engineers, technicians, small business across the entire rail value chain. We are targeting as a country 250 million tons per annum. We have 11 POCs. There is already a 3.4 billion investment. The next thing that we must do, we must now list the companies that are ready to take on this, the 250. And sometimes we are led to believe that private sector is competing with Transnet. As an African child, I was never taught about competition. As an African child, I was taught about Ubuntu. When people work together, they work together for the greater good of everyone. So for us, rail reform, it's not competition, but rather collaboration. It is us helping South Africa to be competitive. We are part of the chain that ensures that the country moves. They say logistics is the backbone of an economy. We are the backbone of the economy. But we need to be vocal and understand intimately how important the work that we do is. ARA is here. We have achieved rail reform. The next mountain to climb is localization. It is not a journey that I wish to travel alone, and hence we have committed to do this study, because empirical evidence is important than English. We can't go and claim that we have locally produced product, whereas we can't do show and tell. We need to prove. And when we know that we have this gap in the industry, that gap should suggest to entrepreneurs that there's a gap in the market, I could invest in that. So there's a whole lot more things that we can do. And this is a call to action. And being humble, as I've always been the servant of the railway sector, that we are here as ARIA. We are initiating this study in the best interest of the industry. And your participation means a different tomorrow for our children. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Marcella. Quite in-depth presentation and setting the scene for us and the way forward. Thank you for sharing your insights. Ladies and gents, yeah, on our program now, we've got the interactive panel discussions, Q&A, and we're going to give you opportunity to ask questions. I see there's already a few questions in the chat room. How we're going to do this, if you want to ask a question, you can raise your hand. Once recognized, then you can unmute yourself and ask the question. Can I perhaps have the panelists, Marcella and Chanel? I don't know if Arnand is also going to join. If you maybe can unmute yourselves and switch on your camera so they can bring you into the panel, please, on Zoom. I appreciate that. Chanel, right? And can we have Marcella? Marcella, you said you're in hiding.
I'm here.
Okay. Right. Thank you, Marcella and Chanel. Here's our panel. Chanel, can you perhaps switch on your camera, please?
You sure?
There we go. Great. All right. So let's give Yulisa Kani opportunity. Lisa, thank you. You can unmute yourself and ask your questions. Guys, when you ask a question, kindly just identify yourself, and then you can address the question to one member of the panel or to the panel as a whole. So let's take Yulisa Kani. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Harry, and I'm trying to unmute myself. Good morning, everybody. I'm Yolisa Kani. I'm the Chief Business Development Officer at Transnet. I'm wearing a lot of hats, but for the purposes of today, I'm the lady who's driving the establishment of the LeaseCo. It's not so much questions, Harry. It's more of comments. One, I really appreciate the initiative. We've already had one engagement with the DTIC. They posed a lot of questions to which we don't have answers. And our thinking says that I think that the work stream on policy is going to be very important because it sets the foundation of the direction we should be taking if things are to happen as they should. That's number one. The second point I'd like to make is that we would certainly welcome this, the Letsema team for an engagement to talk about, as we establish the LeaseCo, how ready are we as a leasing company? I mean, we are looking at assets that give or take about 15,000 wagons and give or take about 500 locomotives that are going to be made available or that are being made available to the TOCs, both new and existing, and one existing TOC. And we're happy to say that we've been approached by half of the 11 TOCs that have been granted slots, and we've signed 4 contracts already. So 4 TOCs have signed contracts with us, and we are still in the business of looking for more TOCs. But what I also wanted to say, and I don't know it falls within your scope, the function of the dilapidation of our rail network is a function of so many things. But what we found, because what we see as well is that some of the TOCs that have come to us are also from across the border. And in the previous studies that we've done, we've realized that one of the easy things we can do is to ring fence rolling stock for those cross-border operators. Invariably, that strengthens their balance sheet. A stronger balance sheet enables them to be able to somehow invest in the rolling stock. I mean, rather in the infrastructure. So I suppose I would challenge us to not only limit the work that we're doing to South Africa's network, but to also across the border, because we have traffic going out of South Africa, we have traffic coming into South Africa. And that has a huge impact into localization, manufacturing, and also job creation, rather. And if you are to talk about everything else happening around the globe, the opportunity for Africa intra-trade is actually now, second to the opportunity that was presented by COVID. It would be a missed opportunity. I also want us to, and I'm trying to slowly change the narrative when we talk about TOCs at the back of the target that we've been given by the minister. The minister talks about 250 million tons. That 250 million tons is a target set for 12 TOCs. And I know that the 12th TOC always falls off because it's not a new TOC. But we run the opportunity of missing to talk about the biggest TOC, which is TFR, with all the nuances of it, but they still remain the biggest TOC, and they've woken up to the reality of the fact that competition is there, and actually we like it. It's put firecrackers up in our ears, and it's gotten us to think about all sorts of exciting things. The last point I wanted to make, Misela, is that the last time we did work around the potential of localization, especially when it comes to rail, the reception that we were getting, and I'm not going to mention names, from other entities was they were withholding information. And it becomes very difficult to do such studies when everything is focused around one entity, which is Transnet. So I'm hoping that you will look at, and I'm hoping that this time around, everyone else will be open around. There's us, there's Gibela, there's the GMA, which is looking at expansions. There is other railway authorities that are within the SADC, and we, between us and them is just, a stone throw, or we're separated by a river. But the point, I suppose, to summarize everything else, we welcome the study. We're happy to participate in as far as it allows us to share information, give our input and also just get to understand as we gear ourselves up to get the partner on board. And in any event, whether we find the partner or not find a partner, already doing these tactical leases and it's doing extremely well, how do we then make sure that this very important part of making sure that we don't miss on localization is dealt with before we even are too knee deep into these tactical leases? How do we gear ourselves up for that? But otherwise, you've got our full support. Thanks.
Thank you,
Can I come
Lisa. Yes, please, Marcella.
Yoli, thank you very much for the statement and welcoming the study. And for us also, it will be important that Transnet, I mean, we've met with Transnet team, we've met with the PRASA team, we've met with the Gautrain team at the inception of the study. So those are our partners as things stand at the moment. But we, as industry, we always want to position us as we don't have access to something. And it will be interesting to learn from your team at Transnet, and PRASA will the same thing would apply. What are some of the binding constraints when it comes to implementation? Because sometimes as Marcella, I would claim that, yay, I've got a workshop, and then Transnet comes and views a workshop, but it's a workshop that I thought I had. So for us to help each other as one industry, there is no longer us and them. What are some of the things that we need to be on the lookout for? Can we streamline some of the activities around SMME? How do we help those SMME to not stay being SMME forever? How do we get them to access and prepare them for the export market? So this is not only about the localization, but also us building a different industry that is not centered around an anchor, which is Transnet, but an anchor that is part of the ecosystem. Transnet, as ARIA, a board has made a decision at ARIA that says the following. That ARIA wants to have a strong Transnet, a well-funded Transnet, because the rail industry in this country, the DNA of the railways, a story of the railways cannot be told outside Transnet, PRASA, and many others. We just don't want to overburden you. And I think it's important that let's start sharing the load. And when we share the load, South Africa then survives this unemployment. And then we are able to go onto the continent, because the continent is asking us, where is South Africa? And we respond to that call. Thank you, Yoli.
Thank you, Marcella. All right, so let's see. I see Sydney Kunene's hand is up. Sydney, you're welcome to unmute and ask your question. Sydney, you there? All right, while we wait for Sydney, maybe we can do Charles Day. Charles, I see you also had a question or two in the chat room, so maybe you can wrap also your questions in the chat. Thank you, Charles.
Thanks very much, Harry. I'm just trying to turn the machine off here. That's it. Okay, so I think that my main concerns are really around skills and competencies. And I think Marcella made good mention of the fact that we don't seem to have the requisite skills and knowledge to be able to fully localize our industries. And she suggested a role for TVETs in this, which I very much dispute, because TVETs have over a long time proved that they're actually incapable of meeting industry needs. What I think needs to happen is that industries themselves go back to extensive training facilities which used to exist at Eskom, at Transnet, and at many other of these companies, and which have been set up by major companies in our various industries today, with a specific objective of training their employees to carry out the operations of the companies concerned. And I think that that's where the skills development has to come from. Now, what has happened is that the activities of SETAs have come under intense government scrutiny, so much so that the Minister of Finance mentioned SETAs and the way they're squandering money in the budget speech yesterday. And I think that these need to be dissolved. And I think that that the monies used need somehow to be deployed directly to the industries so that they can use those funds to institute training programs which are specifically focused on the needs, the current and the future needs of those industries concerned, and particularly directed at localization processes and facilities. I wonder if Marcella and Chanel have any comment on that, please.
Chanel, you've done the researches before, and I'm sure you have you have something to say around that.
Absolutely. So I think when we talk about skills development, right, I know the mention of TVET College was raised, but remember, we spoke about ecosystem thinking as a governing principle for this project. And when we talk ecosystem thinking, when we specifically look at that in the context of skills development, we're not saying that there's one dimension or one approach to solve for that particular problem. There will be multiple approaches to solve for that particular problem across the value chain. Yes, one of it is going to be formal education. The other one would be operational training and technical support. And that's why when we talk about supplier development or an ED regime, we talk about individuals and we talk about entities. Because when we look at individuals from a skills development and job creation perspective, we obviously have to do it with the focal point being the gaps, right? Where are the skills gaps within the current rail industry, and how do we unlock or bridge those gaps, and through what mechanisms? So TVET colleges for sure will be a mechanism, but in tandem with other mechanisms that we will identify throughout the process. And the focus will be value chain skills development, right? So where are the burning points, and what exactly can we do from a programmatic perspective to enable or bridge those skills gaps? So for us, again, and I think the similar principle will apply to supplier development, and Marcella, we've spoken about this in detail as well, right? We understand that from a program perspective, when you kind of look at it from a desktop perspective and you actually read the material out there, it looks like there's, a host of funders available, a host of skills development practitioners available, but no one's really kind of bringing it together and saying, from a focal point within rail, we know that across the value chain, there's X, Y, and Z skills that need to be developed. Now, if we know that, what is the playing field or what is the support landscape around that look like? There's these funders on this kind of realm, there's the operators on this realm, and then there's the suppliers on this realm. How do we bring that together in an ecosystem to then focus on development and addressing the skills gap shortages across the different regions within South Africa? So that's how we would be looking at it. Marcella, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Janelle, for me, skills are they're quite personal. Because I understand where the industry is. We host a number of interns for the past 5 years or so, and those interns were funded through TITA. But what we have consistently found is that graduates are not ready to come into the workspace. So there's a gap between academia and the workplace. And there must be something in between that then designs or at least trains a particular individual according to spec. So if Letsema is looking for somebody with a certain technical, competencies, we should be able to go to the market and train that person as per your requirements. Until we train what the market demands, we're just training to keep the young ones unemployed. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcella. Thank you, guys. Maybe we can move now to Sydney Kunene. Sydney, can we hear you now?
I hope so. Can you hear me, Kerry?
We can, yes.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Apologies, technology, some of us. I had some few questions. I'm not so sure who to direct the questions to, but I think the first one will go to, I think it's Anand, the gentleman who spoke first. My question would be, one, are we looking at, I know that Misela has briefly said something about across the border together with Yolisa has said something. So I wanted to check if the question was going to be, are we confined to the borders of the country, that is South Africa? Because some of us, oh, by the way, I didn't introduce myself, is Sydney Kunene from SKT Group. We are into logistics and we work with the companies, or we've got partners across the border, that is in the SADC region. We are into energy, as in petroleum. We're also a bit of agriculture because we're doing hemp. So my question to Anand was going to be the question of being confined into the borders. That is question one. Or question 1B would be, in terms of looking at the rail, are we also, or would there be anything wrong in looking into whether we call it warehouse or storage? Because sometimes you can move goods to a particular area, or goods can be moving from point A to point B, but as to where will they arrive, that's another question. My other question, I'm not so sure to who, or I think it will be to, was it Misela, who spoke about localization. That is one of the things that we're looking at, like I said, that we're also into agriculture. The agriculture we're looking at is hemp in particular, where we're going to be doing a lot of things like we're talking textile, we've got it, although we'll be focusing mainly on biofuels. That's where manufacturing comes in, but also to, lacking the right way, I'll say components for what you call the locomotives inside. I don't know if it was a house, I'll say the furniture, because you can make a lot of what you call things out of hemp, instead of plastic, instead of wood and all that. So those are the things that we're looking at. The last question is, having said all this, there are permits, there are licenses and hiccups in the government departments. I think it is Misela and Sherin who must come in here to say, where do you come in terms of helping in fast-tracking the processes? We have applied for the licenses in terms of manufacturing. We have applied for permit in terms of cultivating, planting and cultivating the hemp, but the process is just like a bit too slow. I'll take a pause and wait there.
Thank you, Sydney. Anand, you can respond. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Harry, and thanks. I think on the first part of the question, the whole question there is the supply chain, right? So as an industry, we must all be cognizant that we are serving a customer, and the customer's ultimate requirements is what we must organize to service. And those customer requirements are both in price, how can you get the right price for his product to the market? And the second one is, how do you get the right service and reliability? So the rail ecosystem then has to be cognizant that ultimately we are a derived industry. We work for the benefit of customers. And the question raised about warehouses and potential sidings, I think these transfer locations are all part of the ecosystem of trying to see this modal shift from road to rail and create the unmatched gap to make South Africa more, and even SADC, more competitive. So I think it definitely is part of the mapping. I can give you an example. In the South African system, we cross a border at Beitbridge. The current cross-border activities, Yolisa shared that earlier on as well, to say we should be talking greater than just the South African space. And I think the team have shared that earlier on to say, given the African Union requirement that South Africa plays a role in providing the competency for technical resources for on the railway side for cross Africa's industrial growth in railways, we see that we are part of that bigger ecosystem. So in making these corridors more effective, you have to deal with the price points of understanding the competitors, which in this case is road, understanding how he is currently giving his customers the solution, and then how do you overlay rail. And I think in that context, we see that definitely there'll be much more multimodal solutions coming into play to address the different things. For example, on the BBR network that connects Beitbridge to Bulawayo, we know that there's a capability on the track to do 22 wagons in certain sections with a double-header loco. But from Messina going down on the South African network, you can run 50 wagon or 60 wagon trains. So opportunities for consolidation hubs to maximize the rail efficiency is all going to be part of the ecosystem in trying to now solve the customer requirements, that if you want to see them shift, you have to give them solutions that are cost effective and service required to their specifications in time that they need their products to flow across the supply chain. So I think that's going to be part of the mapping in trying to understand the limitations and then finding solutions to address them.
Thank you, Anand. Right, ladies and gents, let's Daniel Hirarlal, you can unmute and ask your question.
Harry, I think there was a...
Yes, Marcella.
There was a question around hemp. I don't know if hemp is the the electric spinach but without the electric, or which hemp. But from if it's hemp, I know that the DTIC are looking into having an export council on the electric spinach this for export purposes. So yeah, I've left my email address there. So if we can get certain clarification, please, maybe I can point to the right direction. And then on government processes, guys, here's the reality of South Africa. When government says they're not funding certain people, it means that if a government department is supposed to run with 10 people, it may end up running with 4 people because they are not recruiting. And that in itself puts a strain on the systems. Our brothers and sisters on that side are overworked, and it is us that need to highlight their these difficulties that they face. But over and above that, the Silly Act, PFMA, people need to follow certain processes, and those processes defined by the PFMA prevents our brothers and sisters from moving quickly. So there are binding constraints. It's not necessarily that government is not responsive, but it's the systems itself that are not responsive. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcella. Daniel, you want to ask a question?
Yes, thanks. Thank you, Harry. Just to add on to the training, supporting localization and the industry. I come from such product in terms of when I was working as a mechanic years back. What was happening? The industry recruited people first, right? You go in like for a year, you can go in for 2 blocks or even 1 block. So you probably have 9 months of practical training. So what happened in the industry, like they say the motor industry, they will take people who wants to be motor mechanic, or that goes to any other industry as well, right? So the company knows what they want. So they bring in the incumbent, and they shape and mold them in terms of administration. All the training comes in. So they do a block release to the FET college, because FET college is not a new thing. I've been there years back. So I've been trained there, and I grew from that sphere into logistics and right to the top level. So now what we have, the FET college, where people are spending like a year or 2 years, and then you're doing like a month or 6 months or 1 year training. So it's the other way around. And I don't know whether it's working well, but I know as a product coming from there, I like day one, you work in a technical workshop, you learn the processes, even at the administration, even the customer side of it, everything, and you get a block release to go and do the practical until you get that qualification. And we had a time span of 5 years, that the maximum or the minimum of 3 years. So it worked so well. So the FET college do the theory part, and the industry does the practical part. And I can tell you, I have now grew from that. And while working there, I scoped myself from that level, and now I've got my own company, which I do driver training. I just retired from the municipality for 35 years, managing the entire infrastructure, logistics, the harbor, and the whole works. So it gives you insight. So I think we should look at that and incentivize supply chain industries, how it works. Now it's done the other way around. So that's my take. Thank you so much, and good presentation, and God bless.
Thank you, Daniel. Marcella, you guys want to respond?
Yeah, Harry, look, for me, I go back to the system again. If I don't get long-term contracts because there is no long-term planning, I can't commit investment into a training facility, because my business is about survival, but not about sustainability. So there is a clear link across education and what we get on the other side. And to achieve the economic growth that we need, there are certain choices that we need to make. And those choices includes providing the information that is related to the study, so that we start making different decisions. Even if when we asked about particular things in the study, we design questions in a particular way, there's nothing stopping you to say, by the way, you have not asked me this, but this is a pain point for me. So that we take that information and we do something about it. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Marcella.
And Harry, can I just add on to that, because this question of skills development has come up quite a few times. So if you'd allow me that opportunity quickly.
Yes, please.
Okay, so I mean, I think I mentioned it previously as well, but addressing the skills gaps in rail specifically would require a multi-dimensional approach, right? So we would need to focus on what are the skills gaps, and then what are the opportunities for learning and development in terms of soft skills training, 4IR and technical upskilling as well, with the industry shifts and the movement towards automated control systems and that sort of a thing, as well as the triple Ps, right? So how do we collaborate with the likes of ARIA, with the likes of RSR, to obtain the relevant, or to scale the relevant training and obtain the relevant accreditations and certifications, right? Notwithstanding that there is an industry and academic linkage that's also important, whereby we would need to partner with universities and vocational schools. So what we're saying is, ultimately, the investment in rolling stock needs to be matched with scaling and investment within skills development through collaborating with partners that have budgets for skills development training, as well as the operators and suppliers within the industry to facilitate practical learning and exposure kind of programs alongside theoretical approaches to learning. So I guess, yeah, that's how I would summarize it.
Thank you, Chanel. I don't know, Anand, if you want to respond?
No, all good on my side. All good on my side.
Thank you, Anand. I've got I see one here in the chat room, Ronnie Timbalani. He's talking about where can small companies procure locomotives in the local market, and then sort of related, Ronnie's also saying, if you're not one of the 11 operators chosen by Transnet, can other small rail companies still knock at Areas or Transnet's doors?
So let me try to answer that. Yeah, so the process is articulated in the network statement, which is published through the Department of Transport by TRIM, who's the authorized operator of the network. And we know in the minister's statement that the next round of applicants for companies who would like to have slots identified on the corridor will come out in March, April, as per the network statement process, which says annually there will be a capability for people to apply. So that process is definitely entrenched within the network statement, and I'll urge everyone who wants to play in the space to please go onto the TRIM website. They've got all the necessary documentation there that articulates the different corridors, articulates the different slots that exist on these corridors, the limitations that are there currently, and around that you'll be able to then look at solutions to build solutions for customers. As indicated earlier on, it is very important that to acknowledge that this onboarding of new train operating companies, and I think Yolisa also articulated that there is 12, 11 new and the one incumbent. That's the base 185 million tons that they've indicated they could do over the next period to get to the 250 million target. And that then leaves potentially 65 million tons that existing 11 and potentially new TOCs that will be onboarded to make up that gap to get the industry all delivering on the 250 million target. So yes, there's lots of room and lots of scope for many players to play in the area, and all of it deals with finding the customer, because ultimately that is what you're trying to solve, then building the bespoke solution for the customer that allows him to lower his cost of logistics by now transferring him back into the rail ecosystem. So I think that process is totally available to multi-partners. In terms of locomotives, I think we all are well aware, and I think the Letsema study will bring that out as well, that locomotives by their nature need a certain batch size if you're trying to create localization. Without a certain batch size, you can't really create a whole localized ecosystem to create a brand new locomotive. And that's something that we've as a TOC have reached out to all suppliers of locomotives and there's not many of them out there, to say, okay, what solutions exist to actually bring on board, a localized locomotive in that can be Cape gauged for South Africa. And I think that's one of the good learnings we'd like to see come out of the study, is what's possible, what's not possible. But what we do know in the international supply chains, as Cape gauge rolling stock, which we utilize on our country, is quite limited in the number of countries that actually use the Cape gauge rolling stock. You have got that concern that you need a certain level of volume if you want to create an entire localized supply chain to enable that. And that's to deal with new locals. But in terms of the hybrids of finding renovation capabilities, linking things on the corridor, I think there's many case studies that are coming to fare on them. But I think the exercise that we're all trying to do here is we all lean in so that this whole process can be adequately mapped out. We'll all understand the capabilities that our industry has in order to satisfy opportunities to onboard more volume onto the rail network. Thank you.
Thank you, Anand. Well said. All right. Yeah, ladies and gents, we're getting to the end of the panel discussion now. Is there any burning question? I see There are comments in the chat room, but it's also already been answered. Also, thank you to Alvin Harris for helping out with that. I see a lot of comments taking place there. Well done with that. Seem to me Uber is happy. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask some closing comments from Chanel and Marcella. Then the Letsema team will take us through the call to action, and then we'll ask the chairperson, Anand, for closing remarks at the end and to close the session for us. Is that okay with you guys? So let's give our panel a good hand. Thank you very much. Right, Chanel, some closing comments from your side.
Thank you, Harry. So from my side, I would just like to encourage everyone to participate. I think the study is meaningful for all stakeholders involved. And I think the more input we get, obviously that just creates a richer study and creates a more practical approach in terms of how we approach localization and transformation. So I'm keen to engage. And we've got a couple mechanisms for engagement that I'll go through now when Harry affords me the opportunity. But we're really looking forward to connecting with you guys. And I think when you look at our engagement approach and, you know, try and understand the perspective we're coming from, please feel comfort in the fact that we are acknowledging the fact that there are industry constraints, there are development challenges, there are supply chain gaps. We're well aware of it, and we're not kind of dismissing that. But what we want to do is understand what challenges are solvable in the context of localization, transformation, industrialization, and what challenges are, you know, part and parcel of the industry, the phase we're in, and what can we solve for now, and what do we need to implement kind of prerequisites to solve for in the future. So I think we're well aware of the structural constraints, the industry constraints, the supply constraints in the operating environment, and the infrastructure constraints as well. And it's important that we discuss that, right, through our engagement process so that we understand the context of those challenges and problem statements from different perspectives so that we're able to provide meaningful solutions to problems that we can solve for and problems that we need to probably think about solving for in the future. So that's it from me, Harry. Thank you.
Thank you, Chanel. Much appreciated. Marcella.
Harry, you're forgetting one of our most important stakeholders,
Yes.
Lungi. She said that she would come in
Okay.
towards the end, yes.
Lungi, would you please come in? Unmute yourself. Switch on camera.
Well, I'm not sure if I was happy or not happy about being forgotten. Thank you, Harry. Greetings, everyone. But of course, Marcella is not gonna let me not speak. The DTIC has been working very closely with LSF, ARIA, and the industry at large, especially the new train operators. We are very, and the host has asked you to start your video. Okay. Okay.
Thank you, Lungi.
All right. So we are very encouraged by the commitment of the train operators to do work locally amidst all the challenges that they are facing. We've got things that we believe that are a no-no. Some of those things are things that are already available in the country. So when we started seeing a spike in the importation of wagons, we called and said, no, this cannot be. We need to make sure that wagons are manufactured in the country. So people like Anand, people like Traction, people like Global. Global is a TOC, and they are also a manufacturer of wagons. We've got Gallison. Gallison also manufactures wagons. We've got Transnet Engineering. They manufacture wagons. They've got 6 facilities where they have the capabilities to manufacture wagons. So we are encouraging the country because we have seen factories closing down. We don't want our legacy as the rail to be a legacy of facilities that are closed down. This is the money of the state. The state, our tax, has bought these facilities. So it is important that everything is done to make sure that they don't close down. Whilst we are importing things that we can do from other countries. We've got OEMs like Wabtec and Knorr-Bremse. They can do the braking system in the country. That needs to be protected. We've got companies that can do wheel sets in the country. We need to encourage our partners, Anand, Alstom, to look at that in terms of the wheel sets and see if they cannot purchase the wheel sets locally. So I do want to say we agree as the department that when we work together, government and the local sector, we can do a lot. And we've seen it. I mean, Alstom, they are at the end of their line. But because of the agreement that they now have with Anand, they will still continue whilst they are looking for other opportunities. So those people who were going to be laid off this year, they will not be laid off this year. That process will be prolonged for some time, and hopefully we can get some export work that they can actually do. So it's all about when you hear that Score Metal is closing down, when you hear that AMSA is closing down, these are the type of meetings where we can actually prevent those things from happening by the decisions that we are making. We are hoping to have a meeting with Transnet because there's a need for second-hand locomotives to be made available to be sold. So we are hoping that we can, as an industry, have some local available second-hand diesel locomotives that can be made available to be sold, and the train operators can buy them and be able to use them without having to buy outside of the country. So we are at a space as a country where if we don't protect our homes, if we don't protect our manufacturing space, I mean, Transnet used to employ, they are employing half of what they used to employ before. So we need to get back to seeing them being busy. I mean, I was saying to Major, Bloemfontein, for instance, Transnet is the biggest employer in Bloemfontein. So if there's no activity at Transnet in Bloemfontein, then that area is going to suffer, and those people are going to have to come to Gauteng to look for employment, and there's no employment in Gauteng. So that's the situation that we are in. So I know I'm all over the place because we are at the end of our discussion. So the study with Letsema, as they've already said, that we are endorsing it and we are there participating. It's going to help us to protect the importation. But what I'm encouraging is let's not wait for policy. Let us be self policies of our industry. Let's not wait for policy to say to us, you cannot do this. You as a South African child understand that I cannot do this because if I do it, it means I'm taking my bread and I'm giving it away. And I'm saying somebody else must eat whilst I'm starving. So hence I started by saying we are encouraged by the patriotism that we've seen with the train operators that we've engaged with. They did not say we are waiting for designation to be finalized. They said, I can do this for my country and I'm doing it. So well done on that. And if we can keep it like that, it will go a long way. We will stand one day in the commission when they're investigating what happened, because we are good in investigating in this country. We can stand and say, Anand played his part, James played his part, Mesila played her part. So let's play our part before we've got a policy that says, I am forcing you to buy locally. I hope I did make sense. Thank you.
Made a lot of sense.
Yeah. So I can come in, Harry?
No, I said it made a lot of sense. Thank you, Lungi.
Thank you.
Mesela, yeah, so now, Mesela, can we ask you for your closing comments?
The DTIC can only support us when we support them. And they can only action, you can see how patriotic and the empathy that comes from government. And government through the DTIC is saying that we want the best for the country. And I think the only element that is missing is us. And I think as ARIA, we are not only having a webinar to talk about localization. And I think that my love for localization tends to brush off the chairpersons of the board. James Holly was the chairperson of this board, and he has invested in localization. And my new chairperson of the board has saved jobs. And our sector is still largely dominated by Black men. And you have saved Black men from Alstom from not being reduced to zero in their communities. And for me, localization, I look at it that sense, that it is the men and women, the single mothers, my mother who brought me up, that worked, that was able to bring up the person that I am. So that's what localization means. And when we can feel pain, and maybe we should have 100 chairpersons, maybe everybody will localize, Anand. But that comes from a special place, and the empath that comes from government, you felt it. Let's work together. Thank you, Anand.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gents, let's, can we now take Chanel to take us through the call to action, how to participate, the next steps for stakeholder engagement, and then we'll have Anand to close the program for us. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Harry. So in terms of the call to action, we've got several mechanisms. So we've got several mechanisms that we'll be using to reach out to the various stakeholders. The first one would be an email request to gauge if you would be willing to participate. And that would be followed by one of 3 forms of connection. So we would be having virtual meetings, surveys, as well as physical meetings, right? So you will be invited to attend each of these, or one of these rather, And depending on your availability, your capacity to meet physically, your time constraints, all of that, we will work around whatever availability and capacity constraints you have, and we will then be engaging with you. Should you not receive an email request in the next week, please feel free to reach out to us. My colleague Simpiwe will be managing the engagement schedule on our behalf, and his email is demonstrated on the screen. Furthermore, I've also included my email in the chat box. So if you want to reach out, if you've got any further questions, and particularly if you would like to participate in the study, please do reach out. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chanel. Much appreciated. All right, so now we're going over to our chairperson.
Harry.
Yes.
Before Anand closes, can I just take a minute, please?
Sure,
I do not want to attempt to do a closing. I think our panel has spoken in great detail. I just want to clarify two things. When Marcella presented, she mentioned two things. The first one was around how the LSF or this study is funded by government. I just want to clarify that the study itself is not funded by government. LSF is not a government entity. So as much as LSF was formed between the union of DTIC and private sector, we remain quite independent. And I think in some cases, you do need that independent body to come in and conduct such studies. I think Yolisa, you mentioned and alluded to it to say there were some challenges in acquiring data and getting people to share information. And we hope that the neutral stance we take and not necessarily falling within a specific entity will help mitigate that. And then the second point is around just data protection as well. We want to make sure that we protect people's data, IP, etc. What the Letsema team will be asking for, please do take the moment to ask about confidentiality and data protection policies. We have that in place. But we don't want that to be a barrier that prevents people from contributing to the study. If we have to sign NDAs, we will do that. If we have to sign specific agreements, we will do that, just to make sure that everyone can participate. And then lastly, the third point is around designation having been done through the DTIC. I think previously the DTIC could designate, but what we're seeing is that with the new Public Procurement Act of 24, we now have DTIC having to make an application to National Treasury. This is why it's very important that we provide the evidence and the data to back up that application. So it's again, just to re-emphasize that call to action to say, if we don't have the right data, then the case that goes towards designation isn't strengthened.
Sorry,
Hi.
the Minister of Trade and Industry, he is the designated minister to do the designation. So it sits with him. So the National Treasury is consultation. So we consult with the National Treasury, but the designation itself sits with our minister.
Okay, thanks for clarifying, Sis Lungiswa. But thanks, Harry.
Thank you, Tandane, appreciate it. All right, so now we can go to our chairperson, Anand. Anand, kindly give us some closing remarks and the way forward and close the session for us. Thank you, Anand.
Thank you, everyone. I think it was well attended, looking at the number of people that joined the session. And I think we'll also continue our journey as ARIA, led by Marcella, to really champion this messaging around localization. And the messaging is largely around leaning in to finding solutions, then leaning away because you feel it's too tough. And I think that's really the summary I'd like to bring to the table, that we all got a responsibility to harness the collective growth of this lovely country we're in. And we can only do that by leaning in and then solving for solutions, because as I've shared, a customer is still at the end of that supply chain that we're trying to build. The customer is price sensitive, so you have to deal with price, you have to deal with cost effectiveness, and then you have to find solutions that lower the cost of logistics in South Africa. But by working together as a collaborative, symbiotic role that I talked about, I think that's where the magic will come, because when we see ourselves part of the solution versus seeing ourselves all separate, trying to move in divert parts, that's where the trouble comes in. And I think Marcella's words of Ubuntu is therefore what guides us as a beautiful country, that we are because of each one of you. And if we only exist because of the collective. So if we can work with that mindset, map out things with, and have robust conversations. You've heard some exciting things here today. One of the challenges we've brought to the table was saying, there is a large batch of locomotives that sit in South Africa. Leasco would like to renovate it itself once it has its partner, but that partner is still not close. They have offered the thinking for us to, as potential TOCs, to do that. But it's not possible to bring that amount of capital and put into a leased asset unless that asset is sold and then renovated so that the bank can have title over it. It's not possible to use any of the assets of Transnet currently. And I think DTIC understands that as a challenge, and he's taking that up with Transnet to say, hey, if you want to see some of these locomotives that are standing brought back into the system, rather than bringing in second-hand units from overseas and then renovating them, then release some of this into the market so we can really create, because those can be done definitely in-house between the capabilities that sit in South Africa and the opportunities with OEMs to partner. So those are really low-hanging fruit that we believe if you get the right conversation going and you understand the challenges of funding and understand the challenges of customers, understand the ecosystem that is there that can provide these resources, I think then we will all find the magic of how to really see this catalytic role of growing a sector, having benefit to the citizens of the country and the subcontinent that we're part of. So we're very excited to be part of this journey. As ARIA, we hold our responsibility very importantly, that we are also have the responsibility of DTIC as the export organization for being able to export products out of South Africa into the rest of the continent. And to do that, we understand without a strong local supply utilization, and Marcella has talked about that, long procurement events that allow good capacitating of good technology into production units. You can't do all of that in long-term employment. You can't do all of that if you don't have nice, consistent demand that hits the system. And I think the Letsema study that covers all these elements will allow us all to see the mapping of these things, understand where the challenges exist, and then the objective of all of us on this call and those that are not here is to actually lean in to find the solutions and think of it in a symbiotic way, that we exist because of each other. And if we can do that element with that duty of care, we grow the environment, which has got lots of place for a lot of people to play in, because that's what an industry is about, creating openness in that industry and allowing many people to play in it and create opportunities for themselves and, of course, the jobs that will ensue. So we're very excited to, as ARIA, to have led this process, to have lobbied for the National Localization Fund to take this on as an initiative. Their independence, as shared earlier on, gives them a very good credibility to get the information in confidential manner, dissect them, and be that think tank body together with Letsema as the consultant now in really getting a robust understanding of what is the capabilities for locomotives, what are the capabilities for wagons and all the spare parts that go into that ecosystem, what are the track capabilities for the new railway track, what will it take for some of these steel mills to bring back track into the system, where will we get our crossover points, where do you get signaling from? These are all the big procurement events that are part of the rail ecosystem. And I think if we can all harness the energy together and have these robust conversations, I think we are on a trajectory of inclusiveness. And by inclusiveness, we mean there's a whole lot of people that will benefit by this environment that has been created. So I thank the robust government spheres, including DTIC, that have taken a pioneering role, the Department of Finance, which has now provided some much needed finance to Transnet to put money back into the track, so that because no TOC can come into the space without needing an efficient network to operate on. So we need money going into that space. And then the whole host of other people in the space who are all contributing to make this a real success. We invite many people to please join ARIA. ARIA represents the industry, and we'd love many members to come back into that pool to say we are here to create an ecosystem of growth, and let's do it together. So we are stronger together because each one leaning in. So thank you so much, everyone, for being on the call.